I am Nathan, and I am 35 years old. For 15 grueling, agonizing years, I poured my blood, sweat, and absolute soul into my family's manufacturing empire, working 80-hour weeks and completely sacrificing my own youth, only to be publicly fired by my own father and immediately replaced by my arrogant, lazy older brother. While I was standing in the executive boardroom, desperately trying to present a carefully researched plan that would actually save our failing supply chain and protect hundreds of our factory workers' jobs, my parents looked at me with pure, unfiltered disgust. My father violently slammed his heavy hand on the mahogany table, making the crystal water glasses shake and spill, and looked me dead in the eye. He said, "You are too soft for this world, Nathan. This is a business, not a charity. You are fired. Pack your desk and get out of my building." They laughed at me in front of the entire executive board, including my own mother, who just sat there casually adjusting her expensive diamond jewelry like my entire career and livelihood were nothing more than dirt under her designer shoes. But there is one massive, industry-shaking thing they did not know. While they were busy mocking my empathy and treating me like the ultimate family scapegoat, I had spent the last 3 years quietly, meticulously building their biggest corporate rival from the ground up. And right now, they are on the verge of total bankruptcy, begging the universe for a miracle that is never going to come. Before I tell you exactly how I legally and ruthlessly dismantled the toxic empire that threw me away like garbage, hit that like button if you believe that karma always comes to collect its debts. And please, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. I read every single one, and your support means everything to me. Now, let us go back to the exact moment my life changed forever. The air conditioning in the Legacy Industries boardroom was always set to a freezing 65 degrees. My father, Richard, liked it exactly that way. He always claimed that cold rooms kept people awake and alert during long, grueling financial meetings, but I always knew the real truth. I knew he just liked making people physically uncomfortable. It was a calculated power play. Everything with him was a power play, designed to remind you that he controlled the thermostat, the salary, and your entire future. The massive, custom-built mahogany table stretched out between us, gleaming under the harsh, unforgiving fluorescent lights of the penthouse suite. I sat there at the far end, my hands folded neatly over my leather portfolio, wearing a standard navy suit I had bought off the rack at a department store. My older brother, Declan, was leaning casually against the back glass wall. He had his arms crossed over a custom-tailored Italian suit he had bought using his massive, entirely unearned executive salary. This was a salary he technically earned by showing up to the office at 11 in the morning, taking 3-hour lunches at the local country club, and leaving by 3 in the afternoon to go play golf with his wealthy friends. A smug, arrogant smirk was permanently plastered across his face, looking exactly like a man who had never faced a single consequence in his entire life. When we were younger, my parents drained a massive college fund just to pay his way through a prestigious university, and he celebrated his graduation by blowing a huge chunk of his trust fund on a brand new Porsche. Meanwhile, I was working the night shift at the warehouse to learn the family business from the ground up. My mother, Margaret, the vice president of the board, sat to my immediate right. She was actively scrolling through her phone, completely ignoring the massive binder of financial projections and data analytics I had just spent a solid hour presenting to the room. She was probably checking updates from her upscale neighborhood HOA meetings or browsing luxury real estate listings. To them, my presentation was just a formality, an annoyance they had to sit through before they could get back to their luxurious lives. The decision to cut me out had already been made long before I even walked into the room. "Nathan," my father began, his voice dripping with that familiar, heavy disappointment I had heard my entire life, echoing the exact same tone he used when I brought home a report card with a B- in middle school. "We need to discuss your current position at Legacy Industries." I did not say a single word. I just sat up straighter and looked at him, bracing myself for the impact. For 15 years, ever since I was 20 years old, I had worked my way up from the absolute bottom of the dusty warehouse floor. I drove heavy forklifts. I managed the loading docks in the dead of winter when the heating failed. I handled the massive inventory counts at 3 in the morning to prepare for audits. I dealt with the angry, screaming vendors when Declan conveniently forgot to pay the invoices on time because he was too busy nursing a hangover. I did not do it because I had to. I did it because I respected the legacy my grandfather built before he passed away. I wanted to earn my place. I wanted to understand the lifeblood of the company. Declan, on the other hand, just walked right into a senior vice president title the literal day he graduated. The board meeting yesterday, my father continued, aggressively tapping a heavy gold pen against the polished wood table. That was the final straw for me. I cannot even look at you right now without feeling completely embarrassed for our family name. He was referring to my company-wide reform proposal. I had spent 6 grueling months compiling undeniable data to show that implementing a profit-sharing program for our factory workers, improving their basic health benefits, and shifting to sustainable raw materials would actually increase our profit margins by 20% over the next 5 years. I showed them the charts proving that our employee turnover rate was bleeding us dry financially. I treated the workers like human beings with families, mortgages, and lives. My father treated them like replaceable machine parts that could be thrown away the second they broke down. "You are too soft, Nathan," my father declared loudly, projecting his voice so the junior executives sitting at their cubicles outside the glass walls could hear every single humiliating word. "This company is not your personal playground for social experiments. It is a business. Business requires tough, ruthless decisions. Not whatever this bleeding heart, pathetic garbage is you are trying to push on my board." Declan pushed himself off the glass wall and sauntered over, standing right behind my father's high-backed leather chair like a loyal, vicious guard dog. "Dad is right, Nate. You are going to run this entire company into the absolute ground with all these worker-friendly policies and green initiatives. We are here to make money. If they want a better 401k or a bigger salary, they should have gone to college and gotten a real job instead of turning wrenches for a living." I felt my jaw tighten so hard my teeth ached, but I kept my breathing perfectly even. I refused to give them the reaction they were so desperately baiting me for. "The data supports my proposals, Richard," I said, intentionally using his first name. That always made a vein pop in his forehead. "Happy, secure workers are productive workers. Sustainable practices attract modern consumers and investors. It is not just about being a decent human being. It is about long-term financial stability. The market is changing rapidly. We are losing massive lucrative contracts to greener, more ethical companies, and our supply chain is held together by duct tape." My mother finally looked up from her smartphone screen. She let out a sharp, mocking sigh, rolling her eyes toward the ceiling. "Oh, please, Nathan. Stop being so incredibly dramatic. Your father built this company up just fine without your little eco-friendly lectures. You always were overly sensitive, just like you were at your grandfather's funeral. Always crying, always emotional. It is exhausting to be around you." My father stood up. He leaned over the table, his face turning a dangerous, dark shade of red. "Enough. I have heard enough of this nonsense. I have made my decision, and the board unanimously agrees with me. You are fired, Nathan. Effective immediately. You are stripped of your title, your company car, and your corporate access. Come back when you learn what it really takes to survive in the real world. Come back when you finally grow a spine." The harsh words just hung there in the freezing air, heavy and suffocating. For a normal person, this moment would feel like a waking nightmare. Getting publicly fired from your own family's company, losing your future inheritance, your salary, your entire professional identity in one brutal, calculated swoop. I should have been utterly devastated. I should have screamed, slammed my fists on the table, argued, or begged on my knees for my job back. Instead, I felt a massive, overwhelming wave of pure, unadulterated relief wash over my entire body. I stood up slowly, taking my time. I calmly buttoned my suit jacket, smoothing out the wrinkles. I picked up my leather portfolio, making sure it was perfectly aligned. I looked at my father's red face, then at my mother's cold eyes, and finally at Declan's smug grin. "I understand," I said. My voice was completely calm, devoid of any anger, sorrow, or panic. I will have my office cleared out by the end of the day. You will not have to worry about me being in your way anymore. My father actually blinked in genuine surprise. His brow furrowed in deep confusion. He was geared up for a massive screaming match. He thrived on crushing people who fought back. He lived to dominate arguments. That is it? No argument? You are just going to roll over like a beaten dog. No argument, I confirmed smoothly, turning toward the door. You have made your position perfectly clear. I have nothing left to say to any of you. Declan let out a loud, barking laugh that echoed through the room. See, Dad? I told you. He is too soft to even fight for his own job. He does not even have the guts to defend his own livelihood. Pathetic. Absolute loser. I walked toward the heavy glass doors. I grabbed the cold steel handle, pushed it open, and paused just for a fraction of a second. I did not look back at them, but I spoke loud enough for the entire room to hear, making sure the words burned into their memories for what was to come. Thank you for the opportunity, I said softly, and good luck. You are going to need it. I walked down the long, carpeted hallway. I did not know it then, but they truly thought my quiet departure meant they had won the war. They thought they had finally put the annoying, soft-hearted brother in his place. They thought the worst was over. They were so incredibly wrong. Walking back to my office to pack up 15 long years of my life was the longest walk I have ever taken. Every single step echoed on the hardwood floors of the executive wing, bringing up painful memories I had tried so heavily to bury deep down in my subconscious. I realized right then, in that sterile corporate hallway with junior staff quickly averting their eyes as I passed, that I had never really been a son to them. I was just an employee they could not legally get rid of until now. A convenient prop in their perfect, wealthy family portrait. My mind flashed back to all those agonizing Thanksgiving dinners over the years. We would sit around the massive, antique oak dining table at my parents' sprawling gated estate. The table would be loaded with an absurd amount of expensive food catered by private chefs. My mother would always serve Declan the biggest portions of turkey, loudly praising his minor, completely fabricated achievements at work. She would brag to our extended relatives about Declan's new luxury condo in the city center, completely ignoring the blatant fact that the company paid for his entire real estate down payment using a hidden executive bonus structure that I had discovered during an internal audit. When an aunt or uncle would politely ask about me, my father would wave his hand dismissively, swirling his expensive scotch and say, "Nathan is still figuring things out down in the warehouse. He lacks the killer instinct. He just doesn't have the stomach for real business. He worries too much about the workers." I would sit there in silence, chewing my food, knowing that I was the only reason the warehouse had not completely collapsed under the weight of their gross mismanagement. I remembered the sweltering summer I turned 22. We had a massive, terrifying safety violation in the main manufacturing plant. A faulty industrial pressing machine, one that I had repeatedly warned management was dangerously outdated and needed replacement, had catastrophically failed and seriously injured 2 veteran workers. One man nearly lost his arm, blood pooling on the concrete floor while the factory sirens wailed. I rode in the ambulance with him, holding a makeshift tourniquet. The next morning, I barged into my father's office. I begged him, literally pleaded with him, to halt production on that line and completely overhaul the equipment. I warned him about the impending, massive lawsuit that could ruin us if the labor board investigated the incident. My mother, who was sitting on the leather sofa reviewing her country club bills, just rolled her eyes, sipping her iced tea, and told me I was overreacting. She was more worried about how a temporary shutdown would affect her upcoming European vacation budget than the lives of the men who had bled on our factory floor. Declan, stepping in as the golden boy, forged the recent safety inspection documents to cover up the negligence. He authorized a massive cash bribe to a local inspector and made the entire problem disappear on paper, forcing the injured workers into signing non-disclosure agreements with a pitiful severance package. That was the exact day the illusion of my family shattered completely. That was the day I stopped seeing them as my parents and my brother, and started seeing them for what they truly were. Ruthless criminals in expensive suits who viewed human life as an acceptable collateral damage for a slightly higher quarterly dividend. That was the day the seed of my silent empire was planted. I pushed open the heavy wooden door to my office. It was a modest space, nothing at all like Declan's sprawling corner suite with the panoramic city views and the private wet bar. I pulled 3 medium-sized cardboard boxes from the supply closet and started filling them methodically. Books on modern management and supply chain logistics. Framed blueprints of the original factory floor my grandfather designed. A small, faded photograph of my grandfather holding me when I was a toddler. The only man in this entire family who ever understood the true value of hard, honest work. My assistant, Clara, appeared in the doorway. Clara was a phenomenal woman in her late 50s. A single mother who had worked tirelessly at Legacy Industries for 20 years. She was a survivor. She had been through a brutal divorce 10 years ago and was forced into a horrific custody battle by a wealthy, abusive ex-husband. The only reason she had been able to afford a decent lawyer to keep her children was because I had secretly pushed through a massive promotion and salary increase for her department, hiding it under a complex reclassification budget line so my father wouldn't notice the extra expense. I fought for her when nobody else would. Her eyes were red and puffy. She was clutching a stack of files tightly to her chest. She had clearly heard the news. Corporate gossip travels faster than the speed of light in a toxic office environment. "Nathan," she said, her voice shaking violently. She stepped quickly into the office and closed the door firmly behind her, making sure the blinds were drawn so nobody could see us. "I cannot believe they are actually doing this. After everything you have done for them, after everything you fixed in the supply chain, it is completely insane." I smiled gently and wrapped the framed photo of my grandfather in a piece of newspaper, placing it carefully in the bottom of the cardboard box. "It is okay, Clara. It really is. Do not be upset for me." "No, it is not okay," she whispered fiercely, stepping closer to my desk. Her hands were trembling with genuine rage. "Your initiatives were working. The data proves it. Productivity in the beta departments you ran was up 30%. The turnover rate stopped completely. Our people actually started smiling when they came to work. The sustainability program you designed brought in 3 massive new corporate clients just last quarter. Why can they not see the numbers? The numbers do not lie, Nathan. People only see exactly what they expect to see, Clara," I replied calmly, taping the first box shut with a sharp tearing sound. "They look at me and they see softness because I actually ask people how their kids are doing in school. They mistake basic human decency for weakness. My father honestly believes that if you are not screaming at someone, if you are not actively crushing someone beneath your boot to get ahead, you are losing the game." Clara wiped a stray tear from her cheek, her face contorting in frustration. "What are you going to do now? Will you get a labor lawyer? Will you sue them for wrongful termination? You have grounds, Nathan. I can testify about the hostile work environment. I will stand up in court for you." I shook my head slowly. A lawsuit would drag on for years in the court system. It would drain my energy, cost an absolute fortune in legal fees, and ultimately give my father and Declan the exact type of muddy, aggressive fight they desperately craved. They had an army of corporate attorneys on retainer. I had a much better plan. Something far more permanent than a messy court battle or a pathetic severance check. "No lawyers, Clara," I said quietly. I stopped packing and looked her directly in the eyes, making sure she felt the absolute sincerity and heavy weight of my words. "I am going to show them exactly what real, terrifying business acumen looks like. And Clara, keep your resume updated and your phone on. You are far too talented to go down with a sinking ship. I will be in touch very soon." She looked at me, her brow furrowed in deep confusion but her eyes sparking with a glimmer of intense intrigue, as I picked up my first heavy box. I loaded the 3 boxes into the trunk of my modest sedan in the dimly lit underground parking garage. I did not look back up at the towering glass building that had consumed the best years of my youth. I got into the driver's seat, closed the heavy door, and let the absolute, beautiful silence wash over me. The quiet was intoxicating. For the first time in 15 years, I did not have a knot of anxiety twisting in my stomach. I pulled out my phone and opened a highly encrypted, secure messaging app. I scrolled down and found the contact for Sebastian. Sebastian was a veteran financial advisor, a brilliant tactician, and had been my grandfather's closest friend and confidant. When my grandfather passed away, Sebastian saw exactly what my father was doing to the company, draining its resources to fund a lavish lifestyle. Sebastian had been quietly, strictly mentoring me in secret for the past 5 years, completely hidden from my father's arrogant radar. I typed a simple, definitive message. It is done. They fired me this morning. The timeline is moved up. Sebastian's reply came through less than 30 seconds later. The typing bubble hovered for a moment before the text appeared. Are you absolutely sure about this, Nathan? Once we pull this trigger, the financial fallout will be catastrophic for your family. There is no going back from this. This will end them financially. I gripped the leather steering wheel until my knuckles turned stark white. I thought about the injured workers bleeding on the floor. I thought about Clara's tears and her brutal custody battle. I thought about the vicious mockery in the boardroom, my mother's indifferent eye roll, and Declan's arrogant laughter. I typed back, my thumbs moving with pure precision. I have never been more sure of anything in my entire life. Let's begin phase 1. Burn it down. What my family did not know, what absolutely nobody inside the walls of Legacy Industries knew, was that exactly 3 years ago, on a rainy Tuesday after another one of my father's completely unhinged screaming matches, I had started a brand new company. I named it Aegis Manufacturing. I funded it quietly, methodically, using every single dime of my personal savings, my accumulated stock dividends, taking out massive loans against my own 401k, and securing some heavy, aggressive private backing from Sebastian's network of wealthy investors who were absolutely sick of my father's outdated, toxic business model. We operated entirely through anonymous shell corporations and blind holding companies. I kept my name entirely off the public corporate records. On paper, legally, I was a ghost. While my father and brother were busy mocking my soft approach to business, taking long, boozy lunches at country clubs, and buying up luxury real estate they couldn't actually afford, I was working 80-hour weeks. I spent my days at Legacy playing the role of the obedient, ignored, pathetic son, and my nights building a modern, ruthless, highly efficient competitor from the ground up. I slept maybe 4 hours a night for 3 entire years. I sacrificed relationships, hobbies, and peace of mind to build the perfect weapon. At Aegis, I implemented every single program my father had violently rejected. We offered comprehensive, fully paid health care. We offered aggressive, transparent profit sharing to every single worker on the floor. We sourced strictly sustainable, high-grade materials. We treated our warehouse staff like the actual backbone of the company, not like dirt to be swept away. And guess what happened? It worked perfectly. It worked better than I ever dreamed in my wildest projections. Aegis's productivity rates were actively destroying the industry average. Our employee satisfaction surveys were unprecedented. We were lean, we were incredibly hungry, and most importantly, we were insanely profitable. We had zero toxic debt. The morning after my firing, I didn't sleep in. I woke up at 5 a.m., put on a sharp, custom-tailored charcoal suit that I never wore around my family, and drove into the booming industrial district on the other side of the city. I pulled up to a beautifully renovated, massive brick building and parked in the private underground lot. This was Aegis headquarters, my real home, the empire I built in total silence. I walked into the massive, open-concept top floor. Brilliant sunlight poured in through the massive skylights. There were no dreary, gray cubicles. There were no freezing boardrooms designed to intimidate people. People were collaborating in open spaces, drinking fresh coffee, energized and intensely focused. The energy was electric. This was a place where people actually wanted to be. Elena, my chief operating officer, was waiting for me near my glass-walled corner office. Elena was an absolute powerhouse of a woman. She had spent 10 years dominating at a Fortune 500 tech company before I aggressively poached her with a massive equity offer. She did not take nonsense from anyone, She was fiercely protective of our staff, and she believed in my vision completely. "Welcome home, boss," Elena said, a bright, dangerous smile on her face, as she handed me a steaming cup of black coffee and a thick, secure tablet loaded with our morning financial reports. "I heard through the corporate grapevine about the boardroom execution yesterday. The whole industry is gossiping. Are you doing okay?" "I have never been better in my entire life," I said, taking a sip of the coffee. "Are the Apex contracts finalized?" Elena's smile widened. It was a sharp, predatory smile. "Julian just signed the final paperwork 20 minutes ago. The ink is barely dry. We officially own the controlling interest." Julian was the CEO of Apex Solutions. Apex was the massive raw material supplier that provided a staggering 60% of legacy industry's essential manufacturing components. Without Apex, Legacy's assembly lines would grind to a complete halt in less than a week. My father had treated Julian like a lowly, pathetic servant for a decade, constantly demanding unreasonable price cuts, threatening to move his business elsewhere, and publicly insulting Julian's staff at industry events. My father never saw the strategic, critical value in securing his own supply chain. He just saw numbers on a spreadsheet that he wanted to shrink. I saw a massive, gaping vulnerability. For the last 6 months, Aegis had been quietly negotiating behind closed doors to buy Apex out entirely, offering Julian a seat on our board and a massive financial payout. He took it with a smile, eager to finally stick a knife into my father's back. "Release the press announcement," I told Elena, walking into my office and looking out over the sprawling city. "Make sure it hits all the major financial wires by exactly 9:30, right when the stock market opens. Let's give them a morning they will never forget." At exactly 9:30, the news broke like a bomb. The financial tickers across the country flashed the massive headline: Aegis Manufacturing acquires Apex Solutions in massive industry shakeup. My personal cell phone started vibrating almost instantly. I ignored the unknown numbers. I was waiting for one specific, predictable reaction. It came at 10:15, a text message from Derek. Derek was a mid-level project manager at Legacy Industries. He was one of those classic corporate weasels who always patted me on the back in the break room, told me my ideas were brilliant, and complained endlessly about my brother's incompetence. I had always suspected he was a snake, playing both sides of the fence to secure his own promotion. Today, I had my absolute, undeniable proof. Derek's text read, "Hey Nate, so sorry about yesterday, man. The whole office is in total shock. Just a heads up, Declan is panicking about this new Aegis company buying Apex. He is screaming at the procurement team right now. He wants to know if you heard anything about Aegis while you were doing your industry research for your presentation. Let me know if you want to grab a beer." I stared at the glowing screen. Derek was trying to milk me for insider information to feed straight back to Declan, probably hoping it would earn him a massive promotion to the executive floor. A classic, pathetic rat. I decided to give him exactly the kind of toxic bait he wanted. I replied, "I heard Aegis is aggressively expanding. Rumor has it they are targeting senior engineering talent next, offering massive signing bonuses and better healthcare. Legacy should really watch its back." I knew for a fact Derek would screenshot that message and send it to Declan within 5 seconds to score points. I was intentionally planting the seed of pure, unadulterated paranoia in my brother's empty head. By noon, the financial fallout was spectacular. Legacy Industry stock dropped a staggering 8% in a single morning trading session. Investors were panicking, selling off shares rapidly. Aegis, previously seen as a rising underdog, suddenly looked like a dominant, terrifying apex predator holding the keys to the entire industry's supply chain. The industry blogs were going crazy, speculating on who the mystery CEO of Aegis was. But I was not done. Not even close. We were moving immediately into phase 2, and it was going to be merciless. The eye of a hurricane is incredibly deceiving. It is dead quiet, the wind stops, and the sky clears perfectly, making you falsely believe the danger has passed right before the brutal back half of the storm rips the roof off your house and destroys everything you own. That is exactly what I manufactured for my family over the next 72 hours. A brief moment of suffocating, tense silence before total, absolute devastation. 3 days after the Apex acquisition hit the news wires, Legacy Industries was bleeding cash at an alarming rate. Julian, now operating happily under Aegis's corporate umbrella, legally and strictly enforced the existing contracts with Legacy. No more delayed payments. No more bullied, last-minute discounts. My father was suddenly forced to pay premium, inflated market rates for his raw materials, and it was aggressively choking his cash flow. Panic was setting in at their headquarters. The walls were closing in on Richard and Declan. I was sitting in my spacious office, reviewing the stellar quarterly projections, when Elena walked in holding a thick stack of pristine white envelopes. Her eyes were gleaming with excitement. "Simon is here," she said simply. Simon was the lead senior engineer at Legacy Industries. He was a brilliant, dedicated man who had been chronically overworked, severely underpaid, and verbally abused by my father and Declan for 8 agonizing years. He was the brains behind their entire product line. I knew for a fact that Simon had missed his only daughter's high school graduation last year because Richard threatened to fire him if he didn't stay late to fix one of Declan's massive mistakes. I had quietly reached out to Simon a month ago, meeting him for coffee at a diner outside the city limits so nobody would see us. I offered him a position at Aegis with a 30% salary increase, full family health benefits, a massive signing bonus, and actual, genuine creative control over his engineering projects. I showed him the blueprint of what we were building. I promised him he would never miss another family event again. I walked out to the reception area. Simon was standing there, holding a briefcase, looking nervous but incredibly, deeply relieved. And he was not alone. Behind him stood 11 other senior engineers from Legacy, the absolute core of my father's production and research team, the men who actually made the company run. "Nathan," Simon said, stepping forward and shaking my hand firmly. "We did it. We submitted our official resignations at exactly 8 a.m. this morning. The HR department at Legacy is in a complete, total meltdown. Declan is literally throwing chairs in his office. He threatened to sue us, but we all know he has no legal ground to stand on. Welcome to a company that actually respects your talent and your humanity, Simon," I told him, looking at the group of exhausted but hopeful men. "Your new offices are ready. Your benefits are already active. Let's get to work and build something incredible." Taking 12 key engineers in one single morning effectively halted all research, development, and quality control at Legacy Industries. They could barely keep the lights on, let alone innovate or fulfill their current client contracts. The news leaked to the press by the late afternoon. Headlines on major financial websites began calling it a mass corporate exodus, and openly questioning the competence and leadership of Richard and Declan. The stock took another brutal nosedive, wiping out millions in shareholder value. At 4 p.m., as the sun began to set over the city skyline, casting long shadows across my office floor, my personal cell phone rang. It buzzed violently against the glass of my desk. The caller ID flashed, "Richard Mobile." My father. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. 4 times. I finally picked up, pressing the phone to my ear. I did not say hello. I just listened to the heavy, panicked breathing on the other end of the line. "Nathan." My father's voice came through the speaker. He sounded out of breath, strained, completely stripped of his usual booming, terrifying authority. He sounded like an old, desperate man who was finally realizing he was no longer the smartest person in the room. "We need to talk. Right now. I am no longer an employee of Legacy Industries," I said, keeping my tone perfectly flat and devoid of any emotion. "If this is regarding my severance package or Cobra health insurance, please contact my lawyer. I have nothing to say to you. Stop playing games with me, Nathan," he snapped, the old, familiar anger flaring up for a brief second before sheer desperation stamped it out. "You know damn well what is happening over here. This company, this Aegis, they are systematically destroying us. They bought our supply chain right out from under us. They poached my entire engineering department this morning. Simon is gone. 12 men. Gone in one day. The board is breathing down my neck. That sounds like a severe, catastrophic management issue, I replied coldly, leaning back in my expensive leather chair. Maybe you should have given them that 401k match I suggested in the boardroom. Maybe you shouldn't have treated them like disposable trash. But you were too busy worrying about your own bonuses. Weren't you? Nathan, please. My father actually pleaded. The great, untouchable Richard, begging his failure of a son for a lifeline. I need you to use your industry connections. You researched all these modern firms. You must know anyone at Aegis. Help us negotiate a reasonable supply agreement with Apex. Help us stop the bleeding before the board removes me. We are family, Nathan. This is your legacy too. I let a heavy, suffocating silence stretch over the phone line for 10 full seconds. I let him stew in his own panic. I looked out the window at the city skyline, feeling the solid, unbreakable ground of my own empire beneath my feet. I thought I was too soft for business, Dad, I said quietly, letting the words cut as deep as possible. I thought I lacked the spine to survive in the real world. Isn't that what you told me in front of the entire board while Mom laughed? You told me I wasn't ruthless enough. Nathan, do not do this right now. This is not about your bruised pride. This is about our livelihood. This is about your inheritance. This is about the company your grandfather built from the ground up. No, I answered, my voice turning to absolute steel. This is about consequences. This is about you finally learning that treating human beings like garbage is a fatal business weakness. Your business model is dead, Richard, and your time is up. What are you saying? He demanded, pure panic finally breaking through his voice, shattering his composed facade entirely. I am saying that you need to check your email in exactly 10 minutes, I said. You might want to call an emergency meeting with the board of directors, including Declan and Mom. You are going to need a vote on a very important piece of paper. I hung up the phone before he could stammer out another word. I placed the phone face down on my desk. I turned to Elena, who was standing in the doorway, watching me with a look of pure electric anticipation. She held the tablet in her hands. Send it, I told her, my voice unwavering. Elena tapped the screen of her tablet with one finger. The hostile acquisition offer email was sent directly to every single board member of Legacy Industries. The storm had fully arrived, and they had absolutely no idea they were already drowning in it. The email that Elena sent out to the Legacy Industries Board of Directors was not a simple, polite corporate inquiry. It was a legally binding, heavily structured, and entirely aggressive hostile takeover bid. I had spent the entire previous week locked in a conference room with the most ruthless, expensive corporate lawyer I could find in the entire city. We went over every single legal loophole, every possible defense they could mount, and we systematically crushed all of them on paper before the battle even began. The subject line of the email was completely devoid of emotion. It simply read, Formal Acquisition Offer Aegis Manufacturing. In the body of the email, I laid out the exact, non-negotiable terms of their surrender. Aegis Manufacturing was officially offering to buy Legacy Industries at exactly $42 per share. That number was incredibly deliberate. It was a massive 40% premium over their current, rapidly tanking market value. It was an offer that was so undeniably lucrative for the independent shareholders that the board of directors legally had a fiduciary duty to consider it. If my father and Declan tried to block the sale purely out of bruised ego and spite, they would immediately face a massive shareholder lawsuit that would bankrupt every single one of them personally. They would lose their luxury real estate, their hidden offshore accounts, their entire safety nets. At the very bottom of the email, placed carefully under the precise financial jargon, the strict 48-hour deadline, and the clauses regarding complete executive turnover, was my electronic signature. Nathaniel Harrison, Founder and Chief Executive Officer, Aegis Manufacturing. For exactly 10 agonizingly long minutes after Elena hit the send button, my massive corner office was dead silent. I just sat there in my expensive, custom-fitted leather chair, looking out the massive floor-to-ceiling windows. I watched the heavy city traffic move far below on the crowded, rain-slicked avenues. I thought about my grandfather's funeral 15 years ago. I remembered standing in the freezing, pouring rain, wearing a cheap suit, watching them slowly lower his heavy oak casket into the wet ground. While I was crying for the only man who ever truly loved me, my father was standing 10 feet away, actively whispering to his accountant about how the massive inheritance would be legally structured to avoid federal estate taxes. My mother was complaining that the mud was ruining her designer heels. I realized right then, looking out over the city I now conquered, that I had spent my entire adult life trying desperately to save a version of my family that literally died the exact day my grandfather passed away. Then, my cell phone screen lit up, buzzing violently against the glass of my desk. The heavy, suffocating silence of the room finally shattered. It was a text message from Declan, contained just 3 simple words. "It was you." I did not reply. I did not gloat. I just locked my phone screen, slid the device into the inside pocket of my tailored charcoal suit jacket, stood up, and slowly buttoned the center button. I looked over at Elena. She had a physical copy of the acquisition contract printed on thick, heavy, expensive legal paper. She had placed it securely inside a thick black leather binder. "Are you absolutely ready for this?" Elena asked, walking over and handing me the heavy binder. Her eyes were sharp, calculating, and filled with a fierce loyalty. "Once you walk into that room, they are going to throw every toxic manipulation tactic they have ever used right at your head. I have been ready for this specific day since the exact moment they fired me," I replied, feeling a cold, unbreakable calm certainty wash over my entire body. "Call the security team downstairs. Have my car brought to the front entrance. We are going for a ride." The drive across the city to the Legacy Industries headquarters took exactly 22 minutes. I didn't take a company driver. I drove my own modest, reliable, completely unassuming sedan. I didn't need to pull up in a roaring Ferrari or a $250,000 Lamborghini to announce my presence like my brother would have done. The real, terrifying power I was carrying was entirely contained in the black leather binder resting quietly on the passenger seat. When I finally pulled up to the familiar towering glass building that had consumed my 20s and 30s, the security guard at the front gate stepped out of his small booth. It was Marcus, a hard-working, exhausted guy whom I had known for a solid decade. A few years ago, Marcus had gone through a brutal, messy divorce. His ex-wife was trying to take full custody of his 2 little girls, and he couldn't afford a decent lawyer on his pathetic hourly salary. My father had completely ignored Marcus's request for a small salary advance to pay his legal retainer. So, I secretly paid for Marcus's family lawyer out of my own pocket, saving his relationship with his daughters. Marcus looked at me in absolute jaw-dropping shock. "Mr. Harrison?" Marcus stammered, stepping quickly toward my driver's side window. "I mean, Nathan, you are not supposed to be here today. Your father put you on the absolute highest restricted access list the morning after you left. If he sees you anywhere near this property, he will fire me on the spot, and I need this job to pay my girls' college fund." "I know, Marcus, and I promise you are completely safe," I said calmly, rolling down the window and giving him a reassuring, steady nod. "But I have a mandatory emergency meeting with the board of directors right now. You might want to call up to the executive floor and let them officially know the CEO of Aegis Manufacturing has arrived for his appointment." Marcus swallowed hard, his eyes darting from my calm face to the black binder on the seat, trying desperately to process the massive magnitude of what I had just said. He picked up his shoulder radio with a trembling hand, mumbled the security code into it, and a few agonizing seconds later, the heavy metal security gate slowly, mechanically swung open. I drove through the gate and parked in the absolute best reserved visitor spot, located right next to Declan's obnoxious, bright red Porsche 911. The car he bought with money he did not earn. I grabbed the black binder, stepped out of my sedan, and walked confidently through the massive, revolving front glass doors. The main corporate lobby was usually bustling, loud, and chaotic at this time of day. filled with aggressive vendors, wealthy corporate clients, and stressed junior staff rushing to pointless meetings. Today, however, it felt like an absolute ghost town. You could hear a pin drop. The sheer, unadulterated panic had clearly trickled down from the executive penthouse, infecting every single cubicle on the ground floor. I swiped my temporary visitor badge and stepped into the private, wood-paneled executive elevator. The ride to the top floor felt like the longest, most surreal minute of my entire life. The soft elevator speakers played a terrible, upbeat jazz tune, a sound completely out of sync with the absolute financial destruction I was about to unleash on my own blood. The elevator doors slid open with a soft, echoing chime. The main executive assistant desk, usually manned by 2 people, was completely empty. Phones were ringing off the hook, but nobody was answering them. I walked straight down the long, heavily carpeted hallway toward the main boardroom. This was the exact same boardroom where, just a few short weeks ago, I had been brutally humiliated, laughed at, called incredibly weak, and stripped of my entire livelihood by the very people who were supposed to love and protect me. I did not knock on the door. I grabbed the cold steel handles of the heavy, frosted glass doors and pushed them open with undeniable authority. The room was in a state of total, uncontrolled, absolute chaos. There were 10 wealthy board members sitting irregularly around the massive mahogany table. My father was pacing frantically back and forth at the head of the table, his expensive silk tie completely undone, his face a terrifying, unhealthy shade of dark purple. My mother was sitting perfectly still in her high-backed chair, gripping a heavy gold pen so hard her knuckles were stark white, staring blankly at the wall. Declan was slouched deeply in his leather chair, his hands buried in his hair, staring at the printed copy of my email like it was alive, ticking explosive device that was about to take his head off. When the heavy glass doors shut firmly behind me with a loud click, the entire room froze instantly. Every single pair of panicked, bloodshot eyes locked onto me. The silence in the room was so incredibly heavy, so thick with tension, you could practically choke on it. "Hello, everyone," I said calmly. My voice did not shake. My hands did not tremble. My heart rate was perfectly steady. I walked slowly and deliberately down the entire length of the room to the opposite end of the table, pulling out the exact chair that used to be mine. I sat down, placed the black leather binder gently on the polished wood table, and opened it. "I believe you all received my email this afternoon. Shall we discuss the terms of your surrender?" My father abruptly stopped pacing. He stood frozen at the head of the table, staring at me. His chest was heaving violently up and down, and his eyes were wide with a volatile, dangerous mixture of total disbelief and mounting, uncontrollable rage. "You," he choked out, his voice a hoarse rasp. He pointed a violently shaking finger at me across the massive length of the mahogany table. "This is a joke. This is some kind of sick, twisted, pathetic prank you cooked up to get back at me. You did not build Aegis Manufacturing. You are a warehouse manager. You do not have the brains for this level of corporate strategy. You do not have the capital. You are soft. You care about feelings, not profit. I am the man who currently owns your entire raw material supply chain, Richard," I replied, keeping my tone perfectly conversational, casually leaning back in my chair like we were discussing the local weather report. "I am the man who legally, fairly hired your top 12 senior engineers this morning, crippling your entire research and development department. I am the man who is currently offering to buy this rapidly sinking ship at $42 a share before the open market completely realizes you are financially insolvent and your stock drops to absolute zero. It is not a prank. It is a legally binding acquisition offer drafted by the best corporate lawyer in the state. And you have exactly 47 hours and 8 minutes left to sign it before I withdraw the offer completely and let you drown." Declan suddenly slammed both of his fists on the mahogany table and stood up so fast his heavy leather chair knocked backward into the glass wall. "You stole from us," Declan screamed, his voice cracking with pure panic. "You used our proprietary corporate knowledge to build a competitor behind our backs. You stole our vendor lists. I am calling my lawyer right now. We are going to hit you with a lawsuit so massive, so destructive. You will be working the night shift at a gas station to pay off the damages for the rest of your pathetic life. I did not even blink. I just looked at my older brother, feeling a deep, profound, almost overwhelming sense of pity for how incredibly small, incompetent, and sheltered he truly was. Declan, you do not even know what the legal definition of proprietary knowledge actually means, I said smoothly, resting my hands on the open binder. I built Aegis using my own personal savings, my own carefully vetted private investors, and my own sweat. I did not take a single blueprint, a single client list, or a single dime from legacy industries. My corporate lawyer has meticulously documented every single financial transaction, every email, every meeting for the last 3 years specifically to prevent a pathetic, baseless lawsuit from someone exactly like you. You have absolutely nothing to stand on. You are currently holding a losing hand, playing with chips you don't even own, and you are trying to bluff a man who can already see every single one of your cards. My mother finally spoke from the side of the table. Her voice was thin, brittle, and shaking uncontrollably, completely lacking its usual condescending, arrogant venom. "Nathan, why?" she whispered, her diamond earrings trembling. "Why would you do this to your own family? To your own father? We gave you everything. We paid for your entire life. We gave you a job when you had nothing." "You paid for a convenient punching bag, Margaret," I corrected her, intentionally using her first name, stripping away the title of mother she had never truly earned. She flinched violently in her chair, as if I had physically struck her across the face. "You paid for someone to clean up Declan's massive, expensive screw-ups so he could keep his inflated executive salary and his luxury real estate portfolio. You fired me, publicly humiliated me, because I wanted to treat our factory employees like actual human beings. Because I wanted to establish a college fund program for the workers' kids so they could escape generational poverty. You called me weak, but the cold, hard truth is, I was just quietly building a better, stronger, more profitable world, while you were actively destroying this one with your greed." I looked around the table at the other board members. Most of them were older, incredibly wealthy men, country club friends of my father, people who cared absolutely only about their massive retirement stock portfolios and their quarterly dividends. But sitting near the middle of the table, observing everything with sharp, calculating eyes, was Fiona. Fiona was my aunt, my father's younger sister. She was a quiet, highly intelligent woman who had always kept to herself during these loud, aggressive executive meetings. She had survived a horrific, emotionally abusive divorce a decade ago. She had fought a bitter, agonizing custody battle for her 2 children against a billionaire ex-husband, and my father had barely lifted a single finger to help her pay for her lawyer, telling her it wasn't his problem. She had only secured her permanent seat on this board through a strict, unbreakable clause in my grandfather's will, and my father deeply, openly resented her for breathing his corporate air. Fiona was looking at me right now, and she was not shocked. She was not panicked. She was actually smiling. A tiny, imperceptible smirk was playing at the corners of her mouth, her eyes gleaming with absolute vindication. That was the exact moment the first major twist of the afternoon dropped, completely shattering my father's reality into a million unfixable pieces. "I formally move to accept the Aegis acquisition offer," Fiona said clearly, her strong, unwavering voice cutting through the heavy, suffocating tension in the room like a perfectly sharpened knife. My father snapped his head toward her so fast I thought he might break his own neck. His jaw dropped open in pure, unadulterated shock. "Fiona, what the hell are you doing? Have you completely lost your damn mind? We are not selling our family legacy to this ungrateful, pathetic brat." Fiona calmly adjusted her expensive designer glasses, folded her hands on the table, and looked her older brother dead in the eye with years of suppressed rage finally bubbling to the surface. "I have not lost my mind, Richard," Fiona stated coldly. "In fact, I am the only person sitting at this table who has been paying any real attention to the market. I knew about Aegis 6 months ago." The entire room gasped collectively. Even Declan stopped hyperventilating for a second. I maintained my perfectly calm expression, though internally, I was fascinated. I had strongly suspected someone on the board might have noticed the subtle, aggressive market shifts in our supply chain, but Fiona had kept it perfectly hidden from everyone, biding her time. "You knew?" my father bellowed, slamming his heavy fists on the table, his face turning an even darker shade of red, a vein pulsing dangerously in his forehead. "You knew he was sabotaging our family business, stealing our livelihood, and you sat there at Sunday dinners and said absolutely nothing?" "He wasn't sabotaging us, Richard," Fiona shot back, her voice turning incredibly icy, sharp, and commanding. "He was out-competing us, fair and square on the open, free market. He beat you at your own game." I looked closely at Aegis's public financials months ago. I looked at their incredible employee retention rates. I looked at their sustainable, bulletproof supply chain. It is brilliant. It is a masterpiece of modern business. It is exactly everything this company used to be before you turned it into a toxic, arrogant boys' club that bleeds talent. Fiona stood up, leaning over the table toward my father. "When Nathan sent the official offer today, I immediately had my independent financial advisor review the numbers. $42 a share is an absolute miracle, Richard. It is a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. If we reject this offer out of your pathetic, fragile pride, Legacy Industries goes totally bankrupt by the end of next quarter. The banks will seize everything. My shares will be completely worthless. My children's inheritance will vanish. And I swear to God, Richard, I am absolutely not going down with your sinking ship just to protect your bloated ego." The boardroom erupted into total, uncontrollable chaos following Fiona's declaration. The older board members, men who had blindly followed my father for decades, started shouting loudly over each other, demanding immediate answers, pulling out their smartphones to frantically check the crashing stock prices on the live market tickers. Declan was pacing rapidly back and forth near the windows, furiously dialing numbers, desperately trying to get his personal defense lawyer on the line to magically fix his escalating nightmare. My father looked like he was about to have a massive, fatal heart attack right there in his custom Italian suit. He stumbled backward into his high-backed leather chair, clutching his chest, his face pale, sweating profusely, his breathing shallow and rapid. The absolute realization that he had been completely outmaneuvered by the son he despised was physically destroying him. I sat there in absolute, perfectly calculated silence, watching the toxic empire crumble to the ground in real time. I did not raise my voice to shout over them. I did not gloat. I did not throw out cheap insults. I just let the cold, hard, undeniable reality of the financial situation crush them under its immense, unavoidable weight. "How?" my father finally gasped out, his voice barely a whisper, looking at me with bloodshot, terrified eyes. "How did you possibly do this, Nathan? You were down in the warehouse. You were reviewing basic inventory logs and sweeping floors. You didn't have the massive capital required to launch an operation this size. You didn't have the ruthless killer drive. You are too soft. You care too much about the little people. Soft men do not build empires." I leaned forward slightly, resting my forearms on the cool mahogany table. I looked directly into my father's eyes, making sure he heard every single syllable of my explanation. "I paid attention, Richard," I said quietly. The intense, aggressive shouting in the room instantly died down as everyone strained to listen to the man who was currently holding their entire financial futures hostage. "While you were entirely focused on showing everyone how incredibly tough you could be, screaming at loyal vendors over pennies and threatening hard-working employees with termination to inflate your ego, I was quietly, methodically building genuine relationships. While you aggressively dismissed employee welfare, basic health care, and fair wages as pathetic softness, I was creating a company culture that the absolute best talent in this industry actually wanted to be a part of. While you completely ignored sustainability as some ridiculous tree-hugger's joke, I was aggressively securing ironclad, long-term contracts with the biggest, most modern players in the global market." I opened the black leather binder and pulled out a thick stack of pristine, legally binding corporate documents. 3 years ago, on the exact day you violently shut down my detailed proposal for employee profit sharing, threw my binder at the wall, and laughed me out of this very room, I started Aegis Manufacturing. Every single time you dismissed one of my soft ideas, I immediately took that exact idea and implemented it at my new company. I paid for comprehensive family health care. I instituted a strict, uncompromising safety protocol. I paid our vendors on time every single time. And guess what? It worked. It didn't just work. It thrived beyond my wildest, most optimistic projections. I built a massive, impenetrable fortress while you were busy playing king of a rotting, sinking castle. I slid the heavy stack of legal documents across the long, polished table. They slid perfectly, the paper hissing against the wood, and came to rest right in front of my father's trembling hands. The choice you have today is incredibly simple, I continued, my voice echoing loudly off the glass walls, speaking to the entire board. You swallow your pride, you legally accept the acquisition offer, you take the massive financial payout, and I take total, absolute control of Legacy Industries. We merge it with Aegis. We save the jobs of the hundreds of factory workers who depend on us to feed their families and pay their mortgages. We fix the broken supply chain immediately, or you let your massive egos win. You refuse the offer, and I simply pack up my binder and walk out that door. I paused, letting the threat hang heavily in the air. Tomorrow morning at exactly 9 o'clock, I stated firmly, Aegis will publicly announce to the press that we are permanently cutting off all raw material supply to Legacy. Your manufacturing costs will triple overnight. The rest of your senior engineering talent will resign by Friday afternoon. Your stock will completely crash to zero, and the commercial bank will immediately call in your massive leveraged loans. You will lose this building. You will lose your luxury houses. You will lose absolutely everything. You have no leverage. You have no moves left. Declan stopped pacing. He slowly dropped his phone to his side. He looked utterly, completely terrified. For the very first time in his pampered, pathetic, sheltered life, he realized there was no massive trust fund left to catch him when he fell. The company's stock was his entire net worth. His massive luxury real estate portfolio, his penthouse condo, his ridiculous Porsche, were all heavily, dangerously leveraged against his bloated corporate salary. If Legacy went bankrupt, Declan would be entirely financially ruined. He would be on the street. You planned this? Declan whispered, his voice trembling so badly he could barely force the words out of his mouth. You planned all of this from the very beginning just to destroy us. You are a complete psychopath. No, Declan, I corrected him, my tone completely flat, devoid of any malice or anger. I did not plan to destroy you. I simply built something vastly superior. I built a massive, sturdy lifeboat. The fact that my lifeboat is now in a position to legally buy your Titanic as it rapidly sinks to the bottom of the ocean is just pure, beautiful, poetic justice. Fiona spoke up again, bringing the panicked room back to the brutal reality of the legal vote. I second the motion to formally accept the Aegis acquisition offer. Let's put it to a binding board vote right now, before the market closes and we lose this opportunity forever. My father looked desperately, frantically around the massive table. He was looking for a single loyal ally. He was looking for someone, anyone, to stand up, bang their fist on the table, and defend his legacy. But the older board members were all intensely staring at the contract in front of him. They were doing the exact same brutal, cold math Fiona had done. They knew the game was definitively over. The numbers did not lie, and investors only care about the numbers protecting their bank accounts. All in favor of accepting the Aegis acquisition offer? Fiona asked clearly, raising her hand high in the air. One by one, the hands slowly went up. The old men who had played golf with my father for 20 long years, who had attended his extravagant parties, raised their hands to completely sell him out. They voted for their own wallets, sacrificing him without a second thought to save their own real estate and retirement funds. Even my mother, sitting there with her pale, shocked face, her heavy diamond necklaces suddenly feeling very tight around her neck, slowly raised her trembling hand. She knew that if the company went completely bankrupt, her lavish lifestyle, her expensive country club memberships, and her European vacations were completely over. She chose money over her husband. The only hands not raised in the entire room were my father's and Declan's. "The motion officially passes by majority vote," Fiona said, a deep, satisfying sense of finality ringing in her voice. She reached over, slid the contract directly in front of my father, and handed him a heavy gold pen. "Sign it, Richard. It's over. You lost." My father stared at the gold pen like it was a highly venomous snake ready to strike him dead. His hands were shaking violently. He looked across the table at me, a broken, utterly defeated old man. All the intense bluster, all the terrifying screaming, all the psychological intimidation tactics he had used to control me for decades had completely dissolved into thin air. "Why didn't you just tell us?" my father whispered, a single pathetic tear leaking from the corner of his bloodshot eye, rolling down his wrinkled cheek. "Why the absolute secrecy? Why hide it from your own blood? We could have built it together." "Would you have actually listened to me, Richard?" I asked him quietly, stripping away any last illusion he had left. "Or would you have just laughed at me again, like you always did? Would you have dismissed it as another one of my pathetic, soft ideas? You never wanted a partner in this business. You never wanted a son. You just wanted blind, unquestioning obedience." The absolute, crushing silence in the boardroom was the only answer I needed. My father slowly picked up the heavy gold pen. With a violently shaking hand, breathing heavily, he signed his name on the dotted line, officially, legally transferring total controlling interest of Legacy Industries to Aegis Manufacturing. He threw the pen forcefully on the table, the clatter echoing loudly, and buried his face in his trembling hands, completely broken. Declan just sat there in his chair, staring blankly at the glass wall, realizing his entire privileged, consequence-free world had just vanished into thin air. I stood up slowly, closed the black binder containing the signed contract, and tucked it securely under my arm. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I did not jump for joy. I just felt a profound sense of closure, heavy and solid in my chest, like a massive weight had finally been lifted. "Elena will be in touch with your respective legal teams regarding the exact transition details, severance structures, and the transfer of all corporate assets," I said to the silent room, asserting my new authority. "Please clear out all of your personal belongings from the executive offices by Friday at exactly 5 p.m. Security will escort you out if you remain past that time. Have a good afternoon." I turned around and walked out of the boardroom. I didn't look back at them. I walked down the quiet hallway, stepped into the private elevator, and rode it down to the lobby. When I stepped out through the front glass doors, the cold air outside felt incredibly fresh. The dark, suffocating storm hanging over my entire life had finally broken. One incredibly busy, chaotic week later, the massive corporate acquisition was finalized and officially approved by the federal financial regulators. The national financial press called it the most aggressive, brilliant, and seamlessly executed industry shakeup in a decade. The open market responded with absolute, undeniable enthusiasm, with Aegis's stock soaring to record highs on the breaking news of the merger. But the real, deeply satisfying victory wasn't in the soaring stock price, the inflated bank accounts, or the flattering headlines in business magazines. The real victory came in the exact, meticulous details of the corporate transition. Every single policy I had once been relentlessly mocked for suggesting was immediately implemented across the entire newly merged organization. I authorized an immediate 20% salary increase for all the factory floor workers who had been suffering under my father's intense greed. I instituted the profit-sharing program. And most importantly, I aggressively fired the toxic middle management team that had happily enabled my father's abuse for years. I personally handed Derek, the corporate rat who had tried to spy on me and feed information to Declan, his termination papers, watching his smug, arrogant face drop when he realized his betrayal had bought him a permanent ticket to the unemployment line instead of a promotion was a moment of pure, unadulterated justice. I made sure his severance was exactly the legal minimum. On a quiet Tuesday morning, the exact day the deal officially closed, I found myself sitting quietly in my father's old executive corner office. My office now. I had ordered all the heavy, intimidating mahogany furniture removed over the weekend by a moving crew and replaced it with light, modern, functional pieces. I wanted the room to feel like a place of collaboration, not an interrogation room. The only thing I kept from the old regime was the faded, framed portrait of my grandfather on the wall. There was a soft, polite knock on the open glass door. Clara stood there, holding a brand new company tablet. The updated transition packets, including the new healthcare policies and the updated salary structures, have been successfully distributed to all employees across all regional branches. Mr. Harrison, Clara said, a massive, genuine smile lighting up her entire face. When I officially took over, my very first executive act as the new CEO was giving Clara a massive, well-deserved promotion. She was now the official vice president of human resources for the entire merged company. Her new salary was more than tripled, officially ensuring she would never again have to worry about paying her ruthless lawyer to protect her kids in custody court, or stressing about how to put food on the table. She finally had the power to protect the employees the way she had always wanted to. "Thank you, Clara," I said, smiling warmly back at her, feeling a surge of pride. "And please, for the 100th time, it's just Nathan." "I know," she laughed, wiping a happy, stray tear from her eye. "But it feels really, really good to say it out loud." After she left the office, another, much slower, defeated figure appeared in the doorway. It was my father. Richard looked at least 10 years older than he had just a week ago in the boardroom. He was wearing a simple, muted gray sweater instead of his usual intimidating, expensive tailored power suit. He was carrying a small, cheap cardboard box containing a few personal items, a favorite ceramic coffee mug, a framed photo of my mother from the 90s, a silver pen. It was the exact same type of pathetic, humiliating box he had forcefully made me pack just a month prior. "I am just finishing packing up my desk down the hall," he said, his voice incredibly quiet, completely stripped of all its former booming arrogance and authority. He stood awkwardly in the doorway, shifting his weight, waiting for permission to enter the office he had proudly occupied and ruled from with an iron fist for 20 long years. "Come in," I said softly, gesturing to one of the modern, comfortable guest chairs opposite my desk. He walked in slowly, his shoulders slumped, and sat down, placing the small cardboard box carefully on his lap. He looked around the bright, completely redesigned office, his eyes lingering on the empty space where his massive, intimidating desk used to be, then looked up at the portrait of his father on the wall. "I've been doing a lot of thinking this past week, Nathan," my father said, staring intently at the floor, seemingly unable to meet my gaze. "About strength, about what it really means to be powerful and respected in this world." I leaned back in my chair and just waited. I wasn't going to give him an easy out or offer comforting words to soothe his bruised ego. He needed to sit in the uncomfortable reality he had actively created through years of cruelty. "You showed me that I was completely, fundamentally wrong about everything," he continued, finally looking up to meet my eyes. His eyes were deeply sorrowful, filled with a regret that came far too late. "That real strength isn't about being tough, or harsh, or screaming the loudest in a room to make people fear you. It is about having the clear vision to see what others don't, and the immense, quiet patience to build it the right way. You built a massive fortress in total silence, right under my nose, while I was busy yelling at shadows. It is about balance, Richard," I said softly, but with absolute unyielding firmness. "It is about being firm enough to make the hard financial decisions when necessary, but human enough to make the right moral ones. You completely forgot that there are actual human beings attached to those spreadsheets you loved so much. You forgot that your workers have families, mortgages, and lives that depend on your decisions." He nodded slowly, tears welling heavily in his aged eyes. "You are a significantly better business leader than I ever was, than I ever could be." "That is not true," I replied objectively, refusing to let him completely rewrite history and play the victim. You built something great once upon a time. You just forgot why you built it. You let greed, ego, and the pursuit of relentless profit rot the foundation of our family. But now we have a chance to actually salvage the legacy. My father stood up. In the bright light of the modern office, he looked incredibly small and frail. Declan's house is in foreclosure, he mentioned quietly, his voice breaking with genuine sadness. He can't afford the massive mortgage without his inflated executive salary. Margaret is furious, screaming at me constantly, but there is nothing we can legally do to save him. The inheritance money is completely locked up in the stock transition. He is losing the Porsche today. The bank is sending a tow truck. Declan will finally have to learn how to actually work for a living, I said coldly, feeling no sympathy for the brother who had mocked me my entire life. It builds character. He should try it sometime. My father nodded, heavily accepting the brutal reality of the situation. He picked up his cardboard box and walked slowly toward the door. Goodbye, Nathan. I am deeply proud of you. I just wish I had seen it sooner. Goodbye, Richard, I said. I watched him walk down the hallway, a broken old man leaving his entire empire behind. I didn't feel joy at his downfall. I just felt a quiet, profound, overwhelming peace. The toxic, generational cycle of our family had officially been broken forever. The next morning, I called my first massive company-wide town hall meeting as the undisputed CEO of the newly merged organizations. Thousands of employees from both legacy industries and Aegis Manufacturing gathered in our massive main corporate auditorium, with thousands more joining via a secure, high-definition video link from our regional warehouses across the country. The energy in the massive room was electric, a palpable, buzzing mixture of lingering anxiety from the legacy staff who still feared layoffs, and fierce, protective pride from the Aegis team who knew exactly how I operated. I walked onto the brightly lit stage. I didn't wear a stiff tie. I rolled up the sleeves of my dress shirt. I wanted them to see a worker, not a dictator. Some of you know me as the soft executive who got fired a month ago for caring too much about the people in the warehouse. I began, my voice projecting clearly through the microphone. A ripple of nervous, relieved laughter spread through the legacy crowd. Others know me as the secret founder and CEO of Aegis. Today, I want every single one of you to know me simply as someone who absolutely believes that true corporate success comes not from being the toughest, meanest bully in the room, but from being the wisest. I paced the stage, making direct eye contact with the men and women sitting in the front rows. We are not just changing the corporate logo on the side of the building, I declared, my voice ringing with absolute conviction. We are changing the entire fundamental DNA of this company. Starting today, the Aegis profit-sharing program is fully extended to every single employee in the legacy manufacturing plants. Starting today, we are launching a comprehensive, fully funded college fund scholarship program for the children of our warehouse staff. Starting today, we prioritize safety, healthcare, and sustainability over next quarter's rushed, greedy dividends. The auditorium absolutely erupted in deafening, sustained applause. I saw Clara in the front row, wiping tears of pure joy from her eyes. I saw Simon, the lead engineer who had bravely walked out with his team, nodding in fierce, vindicated approval. They called me soft, I continued, speaking loudly over the applause until they finally quieted down to listen. They called me soft because I firmly believed in treating human beings well. They called me incredibly naive because I thought a massive business could be wildly profitable and deeply responsible at the exact same time. Today, we are officially the most successful manufacturing company in this entire sector precisely because of those exact beliefs. Softness is not a weakness. Empathy is a highly strategic, undeniable advantage. Later that evening, after the massive meeting had concluded and the auditorium was completely empty, I was quietly packing my briefcase in my office to head home. The building was deeply quiet, filled only with the hum of the air conditioning. I found Declan waiting nervously by my office door. He was not wearing a custom Italian suit or a flashy Rolex. He was wearing cheap, ill-fitting khakis and a wrinkled, faded button-down shirt. He looked exhausted, deeply humbled, and completely defeated by the harshness of reality. The arrogant, permanent smirk was entirely gone from his face, replaced by a look of sheer desperation. "I watched the town hall stream," Declan said quietly, refusing to make eye contact with me, staring firmly at his worn-out shoes. "It was a really good speech, Nathan." "What do you want, Declan?" I asked, keeping my tone guarded and strict. I was not going to let him manipulate his way back into any position of power. "I lost my condo," he admitted, his voice cracking with genuine fear and shame. "The bank took it this morning. Mom and Dad won't let me move back into the estate. Dad said I need to figure it out on my own. I have no money, Nathan. I have no marketable skills. I don't know how to do anything real. I don't know how to survive." I looked at my older brother, the pampered golden child, completely stripped of his gold, facing the harsh, unforgiving reality of the real world for the very first time in his adult life. "I am not giving you an executive position, Declan," I said firmly, establishing the absolute, unbreakable boundary. "You have not earned it, and you would rapidly destroy the positive culture I am trying to build here." Declan swallowed hard, looking at the floor. "I know. I'm not asking for a VP title. I'm asking for a job. Any job. I need to pay rent. I need to learn how to actually work." I studied his face for a long, quiet moment. I could have completely destroyed him. I could have turned him away, called security, and let him hit absolute rock bottom on the streets. But that was exactly what Richard would have done. That was the toxic, vindictive legacy I was trying so hard to erase from our bloodline. "There is a position currently open on the warehouse floor," I said evenly, crossing my arms. "Loading dock supervisor. The shifts are 12 hours long. It is physically demanding work in a non-climate-controlled environment. You will report directly to a manager who is 10 years younger than you. You will get paid the standard hourly rate plus standard benefits. If you show up late, you will be fired on the spot. No special treatment. No second chances." Declan looked at me, pure shock registering on his face. Then, slowly, the shock melted into something resembling genuine, desperate gratitude. "I'll take it," he said softly, nodding his head rapidly. "Thank you, Nathan. Seriously. Thank you. Be there tomorrow morning at exactly 6 a.m., I told him, turning away to grab my briefcase. "Don't make me regret this." As I finally drove home that night, watching the bright city lights blur past my car window, I thought about the entire incredible, exhausting journey. I thought about being constantly underestimated, mocked, and dismissed by the very people who were supposed to love and protect me unconditionally. I thought about being called soft in a ruthless corporate world that openly worshiped toxic behavior and greed. I thought about how true, lasting strength almost always comes disguised as softness, and how the quietest, most patient plans always carry the most explosive, world-altering power when executed correctly. 3 years ago, my toxic family fired me for being too soft. Today, that exact softness had completely revolutionized an industry, saved thousands of hardworking families' jobs, and forced my abusers to face their own devastating, inescapable consequences. Sometimes the absolute best revenge isn't about getting even. It isn't about screaming matches, destroying property, or filing petty lawsuits. It is simply about getting it right, building something undeniably better, and letting your massive success be the loudest sound in the room. Because being soft does not mean you are weak. Sometimes it means you are the only one strong enough to actually change the world. Let's pause for a moment. Thank you for staying with me this far. You're truly amazing. Please help me by liking the video and commenting the number 1 below so I know you've been here with me until this point. This not only helps more people discover this story, but also lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone. Your support is the greatest motivation for me to keep sharing the rest of this journey. I want to leave you with this final thought. Never let a toxic family dynamic convince you that your empathy is a flaw. Setting boundaries is the strongest, most powerful thing you can do for your own future. Have you ever faced something similar with your own family, where your kindness was treated as a weakness? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next journey.